District Judge Brett Loveless did not have very much love for former state senator Phil Griego when Mr. Loveless handed down his decision to have Mr. Griego stand trial on public corruption charges. Mr. Loveless did drop a felony charge against Mr. Griego, but Mr. Griego will still stand trial for other charges, including bribery, perjury, and violating the oath of office. Attorney General Hector Balderas was pleased with Mr. Loveless's decision because it will allow that AG office to, quote, to pursue justice on behalf of the taxpayers, end quote. That was his statement. Laura Sanchez-Rivey, what do you make of let's start with the AG. Mr. Balderas had an interesting opportunity here, if we want to see it that way, both politically, for himself personally, and just for the office to give it a little more beef. How did he come out on this? Because the Loveless stuff is quite different from what Mr. Balderas was recommending for punishment, as they say. What did you think? What did you make of the difference between the two?
Well, I mean, I think that there's an interesting article, I should say, by Milan, I always get his name wrong, Milan Simonich.
Yes, our good friend.
At the Santa Fe New Mexican that talks about this. I found very interesting. And it basically talks about how, Attorney General Balderas is on the hot seat on this one to show that he's tough on these kinds of political corruption cases.
Right.
And I think what he discusses, and I found it again, it resonated with me, is that using the Diana Duran prosecution as an example,
right.
He really didn't go far enough, and in fact, it took the judge in that case to actually impose a jail sentence because they were really willing to, in a plea deal, allow her to not have to serve any time. And so I think unfortunately, there's that sort of cloud of uncertainty of how his office is going to deal with corruption cases like this, and then the desire, I think, from a lot of people that people who are, accused and convicted of political corruption like this, that they be treated like everybody else would, and not in some special, way because they were politicians. And so I think that he's definitely on the hot seat for it. We'll see whether they actually come across as tough on this kind of crime.
Right.
I'm not sure that anybody who is not sort of political found this surprising, this decision about having to stand trial for this. It was a very clear corruption issue. There were clear conflicts there. And I think the public probably wants to see some justice come out of this.
9 counts is no small thing, Tom Garrity. That's in these counts, as I was just reading, of serious charges. One of the things that's been revealed, however, to follow up on something Laura mentioned, our friend Steve Terrell at the New Mexican again, asks an interesting question. It turns out we've got some folks in the higher echelons of politics who in fact knew about this deal and didn't say anything about it as the process was going along. It's very interesting. Former Speaker Kenny Martinez, Mary Kay Papin. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there that are alleged to have known about this. What do you make of that defense? Because that's where Mr. Griego's lawyer is coming from, that everybody knew about this. So what's the big deal here?
And that is an allegation. It's, because I think there's knowledge and then there's suspicion. And, there's a big difference between the two. And so I think, Senator Griego's attorney, Mr. Clark, is going for the House of Cards theory that let's pull everyone down with us. And if that's the case, he's going to need to have a pretty big case to fill as far as say, who actually knew about it, who suspected it. And if so, if somebody else was in on it, what did they get as a result? And I think what he's trying to promote is that perhaps there's another Manny Aragon case. And that there were other people in it, that everybody got kickbacks. I think when it's all said and done, I think Senator Griego, if the courts find that he's guilty, that they're going to find that he's just a lone wolf on this particular issue. He just was out there by himself. But Attorney Clark has to do what he has to do for his clients. That's for sure.
What do you make of this, Christine? This angle?
Well, he may have been a lone wolf, but a couple of points. I still think that public corruption is very hard to prove. We've seen some prominent politicians in various other places in the state of Virginia and so on who look so dirty in quid pro quo and up to their eyeballs in accepting what appear to be bribes, but it's very difficult to prove in a court of law.
As we saw in Virginia.
And so that's I think one point. The other is the context of politics. And we have a state legislature that is very accessible. It's approached by lobbyists, advocacy organizations, and all kinds of exchanges are going on. So the question is, how do we as a state tackle true public corruption cases prove them, and then stop them.
That's right.
And there are some conversations about reform, an ethics commission, or maybe a professional legislature that gets paid, and then there's taking away some incentives to wheel and deal. But there are no easy answers.
Interesting. I know you serve your time in the House, and you've done lots of things up there, and I know you know Kenny Martinez well and stuff. But when you read this terrible story about the beats of how this bill moved through the House, did it a little agitative for you? Does it seem like normal practice, or how did it hit you? Curious from your point
So I
of
think
view.
there's a difference between someone coming to you and saying, so-and-so's on the take, or so-and-so's doing this, and you thinking that something may be up. You know, I think one of the things I want to say to kind of answer that question is kind of a shot at the New Mexican and the media is, you know, Hector Balderas is on the hot seat. I don't know another attorney general that's prosecuted 2 folks within the first few years for public corruption in my lifetime. And now he's on the hot seat for doing that. There's a difference between taking your campaign money and taking public money. And I think he's done a very good job of showing the difference. Kenny Martinez, the former speaker, testifies and says, look, whether I think his comments were, I suspected something. He's the only guy that voted no.
That's right.
And yet he's being right. He's being vindicated. He's being hung up. He's been villainized. Thank you for voting no. You know, well, he voted no, but he didn't give a big speech. Well, what big speech do you want? He voted no. Not only did he vote no, during the testimony, it was said that, from what I understand, that they came and said, no, we need you to rethink this. And he said, no. And he moved on. And so I think part of the problem with public corruption, and I think part of the public's perception of public corruption, is that the media has a tendency, when they think they smell blood, they just want to pile on. And I think people lose interest. I think people kind of get turned off by it. I think Attorney General Balderas should be, the media should be saying, listen, we may not agree with what you did with Diana Duran, but the fact that you went from Diana Duran to Phil Griegos, you're clearly setting a tone that you're not going to tolerate this on your watch. Something nobody, except I think since Hal Stratton, who went after public corruption, has done. But instead, he's being villainized. Kenny Martinez, as the Speaker of the House and a Democrat, says, I'm the only no vote in the committee about this thing in the House. And now he's the guy being dragged in and being villainized for not saying more. So at some point, I think this kind of summarizes why people are so frustrated with politics, because there is public corruption, and why it's so hard to convict, because people are so tired of it, but it becomes so sensationalized that people, I think, turn it off and they just think it's part of everyday business.
I'm going to hold it there. We got a lot of time, not much time, on a big subject. And when we come back to the line, we'll talk about a ballot initiative to acquire paid sick leave for Albuquerque workers.